We are live. We are live.
Okay. Just let me see whether the live is working. I think the live is working. So it's fine. So let us start today's program. I invite Dr. Ritu Chaudhuri and Francesca Ferrando to take on the stage. Professor Ritu Chaudhuri is today's keynote speaker, and Francesca will chair the session. After that, we have a wonderful panel on queer studies and its relationship with post-humanism, of course, that will be chaired by Ritu Chaudhuri. And then there will be the round table, where apart from discussing about the post-human futures, we will also talk about the future of our network and the future possibilities of this conference. Thank you all. Francesca, please come.
Well, thank
Welcome
you so
all.
much. Thank you so much, Shamrat. Thank you so much, Monirul, Debashish, everyone who is joining us today. And thank you so much, Ritu, for offering to give such an important lecture on the topic of some observations on feminist post-humanism. So we are so much looking forward to the insights that Ritu is going to generously offering to all of us. I'm sure that all of you know Ritu, but just to summarize a little bit her incredible academic achievements, Ritu Chaudhuri is a Ph.D. and she teaches sociology at the West Bengal State University and is the director of the Center for Comparative Social Theory. She did her doctoral research from the Center for Studies in Social Sciences in Calcutta. Her interest and expertise traverse the fields of feminist theories, sociological theories, postmodern thought, women in India, and the interfaces of sociology, literature, and film. She has delivered many lectures at a number of universities and research institutes in national and international conferences. Her publication includes articles on issues concerning women's writing, women's movement, feminist theory, Tagorian novels, and film text in academic journals and edited books. Currently, she's working on 2 book projects. She has recently co-edited a book on feminist theory in Bangla. So first of all, it is again a great honor for me to chair this session. And I'm so looking forward to hear more about the insights on feminist post-humanism from Ritu's expertise. So Ritu, you are so kind for to take the time to give us this lecture. Thank you so much for being here with us. And I'm going to give the words to you, and I'm going to help chairing the session. So we're going to have Ritu speaking for 30 minutes, and then we're going to have another 30 minutes for debates. So if there is any question you would like to ask, you can type it in our chat. And if you are listening to us live on YouTube, you can also place your questions, and then we're going to address them directly to Ritu. So Ritu, thank you so much again for your generous insights, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Francesca, for your kind words. I am also thankful to the whole group of post-humanism in India. Thanks Debashish, Monirul, and of course Shamrat. I'll just, as I've said that what I'll be presenting today is sort of some sort of observations on feminist post-humanism. And so I'll tend to talk about the significance of post-humanism as a feminist position. But before that, I'll begin with a few general points on the philosophical principles of post-humanism I would be thinking through. So post-humanism, much like other modern and postmodern theories, is an incoherent overlap of certain conditions and possibilities. On the one hand, it homes on On the one hand, it homes in on conditions or states of being, the ontico-epistemological, the scientific and biotechnological developments of the 20th and 21st centuries, with regard to its nature, appearance, or working, while on the other hand, posthumanism hints at certain possibilities or states of being possible. It negotiates with the anti-anthropocentric memories and imaginations of posthumans. Here, conditions work both as nouns and verbs. As nouns, they represent states of being, contexts or situations, and as verbs, they act upon or have effect on certain possibilities. Yet, the possibilities of posthumanism can never be fully conditioned by posthuman conditions. Context and conditions are partial, are perspectives shared from within certain socio-temporal coordinates. The possibilities of posthumanism cannot be circumscribed by anthropocentric socio-temporal terms and conditions. Traversing through contemporary times, the post-human possibilities move far and beyond the futuristic implications of technological predilections and anxieties of human beings. Also, the post-human possibilities are not completely severed from context and conditions. The marks of the Anthropocene, the bearings of human activities on the planet, the implications of human action cannot be wished away while decentering the human as a category and thinking of a philosophical beyond. This will be a failure, an ethico-political failure. The link between conditions and possibilities in certain ways is paradoxical. Albeit being logically linked, each is not reducible to the other. As told earlier, this clarifying formulation is not specific to post-humanist thought. What is specific to post-humanist thought is a misconception, a mistaken tendency to merge the possibility with the condition and see posthumanism as the transhuman negotiations with the horrors and delights of space-age technology and its extrapolations. The primacy of science and technology implicit in this misconceived position, in a way, reinstates the preeminence of the human. I begin with this as I want to make a point. I just want to say that human and several other marginal categories feminism had long been struggling for, although are always implicated in something that we call an originary technicity, although they are always already implicated in an originary technicity. They might not share the mechanized dystopia or transhuman utopia as the only concern one might allegedly think posthumanism produces. The philosophical strands of posthumanism would rather read conditions and possibilities in an alliance which marks the coming together of events, one or many, into the fold of others without being subsumed in the process. They attempt to release both condition and possibility from the overarching discourses of rationality and progress. Beyond the anthropocentric, they tend to think of non-fixed and mutable conditions and thread out effectual continuities between human, animal, plants, objects, and machines. Now, taking this on board, I tend to read the post-human possibilities of a feminist utopia called Becoming Woman, as it attempts to escape reduction into the majoritarian, essentially implicated into the repressive connotations of the man-woman binary. Sometimes the utopic spark hovers around philosophical discourses without addressing the symbolically and physically violated reality of women across the world. Feminists cannot afford a dream of a post-gender molecular interfaces without attending to the gendered everyday. If they are transported to the utopic outside, who will fight out the still oppressive realm? Yet, feminism cannot be reduced to a dominant logic of reason and reality. The real is repressive and reason is masculine. Feminists cannot live a reality without a dream of exceeding it. They cannot see a reality untainted by the unreal. Questioning incites anger. Feminist questions exceed the capacity of being replied. Debunking yields delirium. It cannot be contained in the phallocentric language. Revolution incites unreason. It bursts the boundaries of reality and reason asunder. I talk about Deleuze and Guattari's theory on becoming woman, interrupted by a few obdurate feminist observations. Being is always traversed by becoming. Becoming is more than a simple transformation of a bodily realm of possibilities. It approaches the space and time beyond the androcentric. Becoming invokes a movement beyond bodies, an unconstrained past and a free future, always also mediated by the present and opens up to events. Event constitutes a surprise, a passage exceeding majoritarian structure of presence. For certain feminists, becoming in its multiplicity and immanence tend to efface the subject. What promise does then the weight of the outside, pervading the realm of struggling women, destabilizing their subjectivity, hold for feminism? One has to keep in mind that the dominant structure also reduces feminist politics into androcentric terms. It repeats the forms, aggression, and insensitivity which feminism opposes. It seems to mimic precisely the majoritarian modes of thought feminism tends to critique. The question remains, how can one not identify with the overarching discourses and work on other possibilities of living, on other modes of life, on other relationships to the other? Now, Deleuzian thought tries to push feminism beyond the immediate level of social institutions towards a greater politics. If one is a woman, it remains necessary to become woman as a way of putting into question the coagulations, rigidifications, and impositions required by patriarchal relations. I quote from Elizabeth Cross. Though the woman offers the very chance of becoming, Deleuze and Guattari do not pose the category of woman as an exemplar of becoming. They bring in a figure called girl as the symbol of becoming. The girl is not defined in terms of her virginity. She is defined in terms of a relationship of movements and rest, speed and slowness. Being is always open to becoming. This becoming is rather girl-like. The girl has a radical relationship to the man. She is not just his other or opposite, but the very becoming of man's other. She holds the instability that surrounds being. This becoming, does not reflect the lived experiences of a real girl. The category of girl, in reality, as we all know, is the site of most aggressive reversion and restructuring of bodies. The figure of decorporealized and transformed, the figure of the girl is decorporealized and transformed into an abstract universal moment or a trope of becoming. If it is not the girl who becomes a woman, it is becoming woman that produces the universal girl. Why is this relevant for feminism, I ask? Winning over their battle against patriarchy is not the ultimate goal of feminists. This battle often is being fought in terms of the dominant. To move beyond the majoritarian, which is implicated in our ideology, in our language, and modes of representation, feminism has to address the process of becoming. It has to put into play the multiple micro-particularities and micro-feminists and micro-feminisms. The girl is the emblem of such micro-possibilities. Becoming involves a tortuous yet specific movement, an initial step towards becoming imperceptible. It is a movement towards being like everybody else, as Deleuze would say, an absolute anonymity. The future of feminism subsists in the figure of becoming the girl because of their nascent potentialities, undermining the fixity of categories and essentialism that has entrapped women in the models from the past. Feminist struggles around the question of women's identities, women's rights, are just only part of a stage setting for processes of becoming woman. And becoming woman is in turn the condition of human becomings, which in turn must deterritorialize and become animal. I quote from Elizabeth Cross again. One would then no longer require being a woman to claim a radically other identity. One has to remember that becoming woman or being imperceptible might not follow a definite sequence. It might not be amenable to our mundane calculations. It may always remain as an impossibility within the molar itself, may appear as a moment of transgression, may permeate the mundane with a surprise. Following this line of argument, I read a moment of surprise in the Hayao Miyazaki anime Kiki's Delivery Service. As a style of animation originating in Japan, Miyazaki's anime is starkly different from Western animations. I'm not going to that right at this moment. It might come up while we'll be discussing the point. So let me talk a little about Kiki's Delivery Service. Kiki is a 13-year-old country girl. She declares she has to live for a year-long witch's internship. She has to put up in a new town supporting herself. Her mother is taken aback. The surprise turns her magic potion black. It goes poof. She too is a witch. Her magic is afflicted by her feelings. You tend to make impulsive decisions, complains Gigi's black cat, Kiki's black cat Gigi, who always talks to her. All the neighbors and the friends gather to see her off. Kiki mounts onto her broom. She concentrates. Her hair and dress flutters, producing a gush of wind. They fly south towards the sea. A sudden lightning crashes into rain. Kiki sinks into a sleeping trail through the roof. She lands up in hay and snuggles in for the night. Morning wakes her up. The train is moving. There waves the sea. A city is floating on it. Kiki and Gigi fly over the sea with the birds past the clock tower. A tiny man from the clock tower catches a glimpse of this fight. My, a witch, how rare. Kiki understands the town hasn't had a witch for quite some time. Before moving further, let me follow the argument of the anime text, addressing a few basic queries. The anime stages the construction of Kiki's subjectivity through her efforts to become a witch. The point here is that witchcraft, even if unreal a work, needs real endeavors and relationships to be accomplished. Two related questions crop up. First, how can this process of subjectivation, charged with feminist potentials, be juxtaposed to a theory that obliterates the subject itself? Second, if there is no subject, who then is Kiki and what is she hoping to achieve? Let us address the first question through a conceptual structure called sexual difference. It helps understand how the man-woman difference becomes congealed as a specific form of difference among beings. The problem lies in the contextualization of sexual difference as natural, not responsive to change. When this difference is recognized as a construct, the empiricity of the categories of both of man and woman becomes questionable. This brings us to the next question. Let us reformulate it before it could be attended. How would the abstract structure of sexual difference nuance the subjectivation of Kiki? One can posit the question of sexual difference in Deleuze's theorization of the molar paradigm of subjectivity and the molecular space of becoming. The becoming initiated by the woman traverses boundaries across other becomings, beyond binary oppositions, becoming the non-human, the animal, becoming the other. So the man and the woman can be seen as events within a field of singularities pregnant with possibilities of unanticipated shifts from the prior structure of presence. Kiki's girlhood cannot be circumscribed into a molar episode of the coming of age drama. She has an ability to fly. She holds the impossible event of flight, the metaphor of post-human outside in her phenomenal being. She puts flying into her practice. Living every day is not a mere relegation into the molar mundane. Her everyday remains animated by the negotiations with the undecidable. This exactly is the feminist import of Kiki's subject formation. The specific style of Miyazaki's anime has some bearings on this. I would not talk about it here. Now, Miyazaki draws a detailed setting of an incredibly simple pre-post capitalist Mediterranean, Scandinavian, Mediterranean or Scandinavian, mid 20th century city on the sea called Koriko, in a time space in between. So the name of the city is never mentioned in the film except as a mark on the bus. Kiki's transistor, the cars, the aircrafts, and the televisions seem to resemble mid-60 models. Miyazaki wavers between the past, present, postmodern times, between the fears, dreams, fantasies of a girl. Kiki is a flying witch, yet not fully a qualified one. She is a trainee. She's not good always on her brooms. Unsure of her qualities, she remains confused. She seems to worry about how she is going to earn her living in a new town. Her services as a flying witch are being bought and sold in that new town, as she sets up a flying delivery service, which is known as Kiki's delivery service. Kiki's fantastic powers are prosaically, anchored in the need to survive in a modern money economy. more than merely being rooted to the banal everyday, Kiki's magic is constituted by her relationships with others. This is also an occasion, as Susan Napier reads, of balancing fantasy with real, so that the message of empowerment becomes far more effective. Now, I do not think she reads this right, because fantasy and real are often mutually constitutive. They are not too distinct to be amenable to the work of balancing. And the call of feminism, as it has been read on the diagesis of the film, resonates beyond the molar discourse of empowerment. Feminist contentions cannot be reduced to an aim of acquiring a rightful place for women. It is rather to see how the place itself remains in the fold of unforeseeable possibilities. Kiki has arrived at Koriko. She meets Osano, the bakery woman. She begins a flying delivery service for Osano's bakery, and as her witch's internship. And she makes new friends. One of them is Ursula, a painter who lives alone in the woods. She also meets Tombo, who takes her to ride on his bike. Riding the bike, they zoom down the hill. She lets it loose and makes friends with him. As the text goes, Kiki develops a sense of unease in the relationship. Now when she talks to Gigi, she just acts like any other cat. Now when she tries on her brooms, she can't fly. Perhaps Kiki's confusing relations or confusing feelings about Tombo has interrupted her magic. Now I'll just show you something. Let me... while Kiki is bitterly, suffering from the loss of her magical powers. Ursula, a friend who is a painter, as I've just told you, invites her for an overnight. In Ursula's cabin, which is in the woods, Kiki encounters a delirious drawing. And this is it. This is the painting. A starlit sky in the wood. There are huts and a chimney too. The sky is to fly, for the crows, for a lonely ship, for the scorpions, for a horse who wings the face of a girl and her tresses. So Ursula draws herself on the rooftop, just waving her hands to the enchanted procession facing the moon. Who is this girl? Is she Kiki? Why is she looking so different? She's not full of human, not full of girl, with an ear on the forehead, the hair overpassing the boundary of her face. Where is her body? Has it been has it got fragmented into her flight? Has it become one with or a part of the nature that surrounds her? Kiki looks different as she is being drawn in her becoming. So she's been drawn in her becoming, and that's why she looks so different. Drawing itself a line of flight remains unanticipatable. It is not like just tracing something which lies out there. So Kiki here is a post-human excess and cannot be contained within the molar memory of how a girl should look like. She is being drawn beyond the memory of the molar, where the authority of man determines what is to be remembered and how it is to be commemorated. I'm sorry. Now, how does the drawing play here?
And Ritu, we have 5 minutes left for the presentation, then we're going to have half an hour for the discussion. Okay?
Okay. Yeah, I'll wind up. So, how does the drawing play here? It acts out a surprise, a post-human moment of her becoming. Why does Kiki encounter the canvas which inscribes her in a flight? It is as if the molar facing the molecular. Is facing always also a work of providing face? Yes and no. Yes, in the dominant structure, facing provides interpolating one within the man-woman binary. No, because the molecular is a movement beyond faces. Untying identification with the majoritarian face, becoming, is a process of indiscernibility and defacement. Perhaps the drawing multiplies and outspreads Kiki's subjectivity, absorbed in her magical flower to fly towards being into the nature. Paradoxically, the canvas draws her, becoming, through her face. Her body bearing the marks of the binary has been dispersed in her flight. Defacement here is the work of the literal face. Wiping out the majoritarian, it is only a face that remains. Kiki, in her pure becoming, as she is being drawn, is in continuum with the real Kiki facing the canvas. Her desire to fly has produced the drawing. The canvas has captured Kiki's desire to get absorbed in the wider nature with multiple other things. Flight appears to be the symbol of a girl's desire to be free. Kiki stands enthralled. The painting has generated a sense of worth and splendor. She opens up, elated. She talks about her loss of magical power, and Ursula talks to Ursula. All you can do when it gets like this is struggle. I stop drawing, I walk, look at the scenery, take a nap, or even nothing at all. Then all of a sudden I want to draw again. Kiki, does that really happen? Ursula, it does. Magic isn't just chance. Kiki, they say you fly by your gift. Ursula, witch's gift, I like that. Witch's gift, artist's gift, baker's gift. Because of that, you have to go through some hardships. Now, Kiki's catching up. Kiki catching up with her with her witch's ability now settles in Koriko and making people accept her for who she is. Her first letter to home is a happy one. And the resolution of her loss of magical power in terms of acquiring a place in the society and a heterosexual hint of couple formation is a majoritarian move in the film, in the anime text. But this is not something to be abhorred. When a girl in her own right establishes herself within the society, the act itself brings in some changes in the structure that excludes her from such accomplishment. Let us also remember the authority of the dominant gets ruptured through performative shifts. Kiki puts her magical power into her everyday performativity. She gains her flight. She regains her flight. Flight is what she desires, and no society can tolerate a position of real desire without its structure of exploitation, servitude, and hierarchy being compromised. Kiki's narrative, although read as a depiction of a girl's subjectivity in its feminist implications, cannot be fully accommodated within the structure of the dominant. I celebrate the fantastic world of Kiki's living every day, mediated by molecular moments. The question remains, when do we think, or when do we take a glimpse of the molecular girl? Now, never if we think of the molar molecular in binary terms. It is thus necessary to conceive of a molecular women's politics that slips into molar confrontations and passes under or through them. Dalus and Guattari fail to follow the nuances of these momentary mediations of molecular in molar, as they are not interested in phenomenal woman caught up in her triumphs and achievements, oppression and agony. I do not reduce their achievements with the girl to I do not reduce their engagement with the girl to men's work, calling upon her just as a trope resolving a philosophical crisis. I think of some undecidable moments mediating the molar every day. This does not dissipate feminist politics, rather helps addressing the limits of feminism operative on the basis of ideological consensus with the dominant. I look into the post-human possibilities the girl holds for feminism. Feminism is a question concerning sexual difference. Yet, sexual difference is not a regional question of feminism. Sexual difference is something elemental to the question of ontology. It is an element of being as such. The abstract structure of sexual difference is not fully derivable from the experiences of corporeal woman. Sexual difference is the conceptual structure through which one can understand how man-woman difference crystallizes as specific form of differences among human, subhuman, non-human, or post-human beings. And it is exactly the point where posthumanism shares its epistemological and ethical grounds with feminism. Sexual difference is an abstract structure and not fully drawn from the empirical differences among beings. Without considering this structural dynamic, subordination would be left as a presupposition. And ignorant of these presuppositions, we would inadvertently obscure and also perpetrate the discriminatory processes that obstruct the emotive continuities between human, animal, plant, objects, and machine. I think I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Ritu, for such important points on posthumanism, feminism. So what I'm going to do, maybe I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Then I would like to maybe invite Debashish briefly on the notion of paradox, because I know that the notion of paradox is also very important to him in relation to posthumanism. Then I'm going to collect some questions from our people here on Zoom and also from our audience on YouTube. So everyone feel free to ask any question right now through our chat. Well, first of all, again, thank you so much for bringing so many important points to the reflection on posthumanism and feminism. I guess I have two main questions. The first one is maybe something that I see as a large difference between a transhumanist take on feminism and a posthumanist one. And my impression, although, yes, you were talking about Deleuze, and Deleuze is mostly engaged with by posthumanists. But my perception of your take on posthumanism, which is very correct, there are many philosophers that are aligned with what you were talking. It sounds to me a little more maybe like a transhuman approach in which, you know, gender is just getting into post-gender, where, you know, the human doesn't really matter what kind of race or gender or age. We are kind of this universal human that can, you know, morph and change in different ways. So I think that there are, you know, very many takes on posthumanism, on the posthuman. And I do see what you're saying, and definitely that's a very weak approach, but I also see other perceptions, for instance, Catherine Hayes, Rosi Bredotti, who are actually talking about a posthumanism that is deeply embedded, situated, embodied. So those are, for me, the roots of a deep understanding on the human condition in order to maybe see how the human may evolve and is evolving. So that's, I guess, my first question is, how is your take between these different schools of posthumanism, and if you see some school of posthumanism that maybe align more with your vision of a feminist posthumanism? And then the second question is about the figure of the witch. And it's very interesting, and I love how the universe manifests, because just yesterday I was having this conversation with a friend of mine who expressed maybe a little uneasiness about her husband, who is an amazing person, by the way. Both her and her husband are amazing people, but he was telling her, oh, you're becoming a witch. And I think he wanted to be a compliment, but she was not feeling comfortable about it. So we talked about it, and I said, you know what? I've been thinking a lot about it, because the figure of the witch has been coming back through feminist history, something that should be maybe regained, re-envisioned. But I also always felt much of an uneasiness with that, because I feel that the figure of the witch is a patriarchal figure, is the powerful woman who is just dangerous, who at the end is someone to be afraid of. Deep violence that is still going on nowadays. I mean, of course, we can talk about the European witchcraft, which ended between 600,000 to 2 million, so mostly women killed because of the mostly false accusation of being witch, whatever that means. Mostly these were women who were working with healing herbs and healing people. And it was also at the conjuncture of the medical science being born, so there was also power to be taken from them. So anyway, I feel personally very uneasy with this story, because it's a story that it seems to empower women, but it doesn't. So I personally feel more comfortable with notions that are recognizing powers of the human, maybe even superpowers of the human. Even the notion of the shaman is something that I'm comfortable with. That is, shaman can be woman, man, doesn't matter really. It can be anyone, can be a shaman. But a witch is so connected to a female history of genocide, of femicide. Not only women were killed in the name of witchcraft, but mostly, that I'm personally not comfortable with that. I know that, again, that a lot of feminists are, trying to give different meanings to that. But I feel that it's almost the only cool figure that young girls can identify with. But I feel that it's almost like you give a gift that it can burn. You give a gift that is really not a gift. So I wonder if, I love your point of that posthuman feminism cannot be expressed in patriarchal terms, and that linguists and language might be re-envisioned, rethought, changed. I completely agree with you. And I wonder if the witch is something that, as nice as can be in some level, is something that maybe it's a history, it's a patriarchal tale that is not really a tale, it's a patriarchal nightmare for what it ended up in the lives of so many. Still nowadays, women are being killed in the name of witchcraft. So those are my two main questions, and I'm sure there are more questions coming in. So I'm going to also to make sure that through the chat, I'm going to be honoring all the people that want to ask questions. And then maybe in between, after you, maybe if you feel answering these two questions, we can also ask Debashish if he wants to ask something about the paradox that you also kindly brought in. And again, I know that he has a lot to say about that. So thank you so much, Ritu. And I don't know if you want to say something about these two questions.
Thank you, Francesca, for this for your questions. Now, I must say that actually, if we are talking in terms of the promises or the possibilities post-humanism holds for feminism, or the other way around also, we must talk about Rosie Braidotti, and we must talk about Donna Haraway, because it was maybe Donna Haraway's contribution had been one. I think it has been a pioneering contribution in this field, where she marked she replaced anthropocentrism with a set of relational link between human and non-human, as she brings in the notions of cyborg, oncomouse, or companion species and other things. Now, the point is that here, I mean, though Donna Haraway is basically linking up talking in terms of the associations between human and non-human or post-human in terms of certain empirical events. Basically, she is the implications which are inherent always in her writings is that she's talking in terms of in terms of sexual difference, the very, very ontological nature of sexual difference. And to talk about Braidotti, I must say that so it so Braidotti would say that it's post-humanism is just a humble point of departure from where we would acknowledge that life is not merely ours. It is Zoe-driven. It is geocentered, and we have moved from a point of departure which is so very important in what should I say, Braidotti's point of departure, which is so very different, so very important, significant in thinking in terms of what feminism is. And in Braidotti also, what I find that she talks about the notion or the concept of sexuality beyond gender. So there is a kind of a continuity between these two thinkers, at least, and several other feminist thinkers who have been thinking in terms of the relationship between human, non-human, post-human. And what I think is the thread of continuity between all these thinkers is that there is a primacy of the notion of sexual difference, which is an ontological or the very essence of being. So I think that is I think there lies the significance of this negotiation. And while we come to the second question, yes, exactly, it's true that it's the figure of the witch is a patriarchal figure, and the kind of violence that is being meted out against the witches, quote-unquote witches, we all know that. But then here, this is a magical world, and I think here there has been a different sort of a depiction of witch, where it is taken as just like another work, it's Witch's work, and at the end of the anime or end of the text, it is being underscored that just like any other work, it's been it has always, it's has to be your hard work through which you'll be able to gain. It's not actually always it's only the gift of or the magical power that will work here. So there is a kind of a translation of something. I won't say translation. There is always a movement to and fro, from the magic to reality, and also from reality to magic again. But then the point of association would be that our lived experiences. So I think here what Miyazaki does is, a sort of it's a different sort of a representation, or maybe it's a very what should I say? It's very conscious. Consciously, she's using witch as a trope, and he is trying to posit the witch, into the society, with as if you have to. As if witches have a place in the society, and that for that the witch, maybe this is what she's actually. I just want to make another point here, that in anime, Japanese anime, there is a category called shoujo. Which means young woman, young girl. So, and this in specifically in Hayao Miyazaki's film, we can see that this shoujo is always a symbol of, of a symbol of subversion, and it is not always in terms of, it's not an inverted role. The shoujo is not always masculine, but then shoujo does what generally girls do, but then there is a kind of different depiction of everyday in Miyazaki's film, where shoujo is implicated into something which is very real, very exploitative sometimes, but then she finds her own ways to go beyond that. And so maybe here in the figure of witch, we can see that the shoujo as a young girl, I won't talk about it more, but then this is a very, very important concept and interesting concept, this concept of shoujo, and it has got a very long history in popular culture of Japan. And I think so this is a sort of maybe an experimentation or a kind of depiction of woman in a different way.
Thank you so much, Ritu. And actually on this, we do have a question related to what you were just saying. So maybe I should just read it for you. It's from Sutirto Roy. So thank you so much, Sutirto, for posing this important question. I love the analysis of Kiki's delivery service. Since you highlighted Hayao Miyazaki, can we say that the posthuman liminality beyond what a girl, parentheses, or human, close parentheses, should be, also evident in Spirited Away?
Yes, of course. Yes, and there are that, as actually I was talking about shoujo, and all most of the protagonists in Hayao Miyazaki's film are shoujos, and in the film that he is talking about, that is Spirited Away, Chihiro is the protagonist, and there also we can see that this the liminality of a girl, that the girl is not yet circumscribed. The girl cannot be circumscribed within the bounds of patriarchal norms, or the dominant majoritarian facade. So the girl is there who is a symbol, or the shoujo is the symbol of going beyond, always negotiating with the beyond, because shoujo is not theater woman. She has not internalized the rules of the dominant or the dominant norms of gendering, and so there is always this liminality. Yes, in a very true sense, that this has been used to go beyond these norms of gendering. But then there are several problems of Miyazaki also. I won't say that it's a pure beyond that he is talking about. There are several instances where you can see that the depiction of Miyazaki is sometimes it is patriarchal in certain senses, because there are hints of heterosexual couple formation, and that in certain senses in many films we have seen that is the point of resolution, and there are several other things. But then beyond that, I must say that there is a specific what should I say, it's an endeavor, or it's a kind of politics of Miyazaki's filmmaking, that the shoujos actually do not wait for the in the whole anime text, they do not wait for a man to acknowledge them, or they are not actually their subjectivities are not constructed in patriarchal terms always.
Thank you so much, Ritu. We do have more questions. This is from Tajendra Kambil. Thank you so much, Tajendra, for asking this question. So this is the question. Feminism is not a humanism. Being a feminist itself means
yes, in a very true sense of merely as Rosie Bretati has very successfully answered this question, and she has said that it's not merely that feminists are have problematized the category of woman, man, human, and not merely because it's a time where we can talk in terms of post-humanism, in terms of context and conditions, but if you look into the very logic or the very what should I say, feminist epistemology, if you follow that, you'll see that feminism basically talks about post-humanism, because it is not mere woman that they are talking about, because what they're hinting at is are the modes of othering. So woman is the exemplary other of man, but then there are this othering actually gives rise to various other otherings, and maybe there is a kind of primacy in other modes of otherings. This man-woman relationship has a kind of a primacy, and that is what sexual difference is. And so I think yes, post-humanism is logically related to feminism.
Thank you so much, Ritu. We have one more question, and then I'm going to give briefly the Debashish who wants to make a comment about the importance of the paradox, and then I think we need to close our session. We are not late because we did start 9 minutes late, so we're going to take a couple of extra minutes now. Ishan Mukhopadhyay, thank you so much, Ishan, for asking this question. So this is what Ishan is asking to Ritu. In reference to the above question, same can be said about post-colonialism, subaltern studies, post-structuralism, and so forth. Then, so Ishan is asking if the same can be said about all these other takes.
No, I didn't get that.
I think Ishan is referring to the gender question, that feminism is not a humanist, also saying then post-colonialism is not a humanism, also structuralist.
Yes, but then there is a specificity of the feminist take. Because when feminism is when we say that feminism is logically linked to post-humanism, we know that we are talking about sexual difference. And yes, post-colonialism and certain postmodern theories, they do take sexual difference. I mean, not in that sense, but then they borrow the logic of feminism to say what they want to say. So, it's not just that. I mean, how should I put it? So the politics of post-colonial politics, postmodern politics are different, and the politics of feminism are different. Specifically, you can see that there are differences in these all these political strands. But then, what is common? There is a common ground between all these, all these post studies or the studies which are or the discourses which are debunking the majoritarian or the humanitarian anthropocentric projects. But then so the common ground is that they are questioning the mode of othering, and I've already of how others are constructed, or how othering is being. I mean, how we are being othered. There is a sort of a primacy of the point of sexual difference, because when we think of binaries, when we think of the self-other relationship, when we think of the West, non-West, when we think of the colonized and the colonizer, hegemonized, hegemonizer, we'll see that the structure of othering is much like the structure, or in these structures, there is a primacy of the man-woman divide, the divide of the two. And so here we can see that in these terms, in terms of sexual difference, all these studies can be linked up. I mean, they always share grounds with each other.
Thank you so much. We also see that Anirban has a question for you. So Anirban, briefly, and then we are going to wrap it up. Anirban.
Yeah. Thank you. I know, like, we have very little time, so I'll try to put it very precise, very shortly. Yeah. What I find very interesting is the question, a larger theme of the problem of definition coming up. This always happens when a comparatively new field of knowledge opens up a new domain of knowledge. It always happens. Like posthumanism, definitely, I think, is one such endeavor, one such word which is trying to open up a new space of knowledge. And so, as we see here today, the question of definition, how does one define? How does one define a new space of knowledge? How does one define something which is like quote unquote new. So maybe like all these questions that are coming up, they really deal with this definition of newness and how to deal with the new classificatory principles that are formed, that are created in the formation of a new space of knowledge. So maybe like there are like two ways, like there are many ways of looking at a new space, but at two ends will be, at one end will be efforts that will try to create and stick to the definitional principles in very strict terms. And that is productive in various ways, but that also has its limits. And another aim would be to focus on the genealogy of the formation of this newness, where one will move across the different classificatory grids. So I think here, like conversation is going on, like say post-humanism, transhumanism, whether they are completely different or they move into each other, whether one would like talk about internal differentiations of the human along with the external differentiations of the human, and then what happens to the specificities of these different others that Ritu was saying. So I think it's a very interesting thing to talk about, and I am really happy that this has been produced. So this is more of a very small comment. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Nirban, for putting it so clearly. You nailed it. I think that you really brought the conversation to also the theoretical aspects of that. Thank you so much. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give Debashish 1 minute to also comment on the paradox, and then I'm going to give you, Ritu, the last minute because we have 2 minutes. Debashish.
No, firstly, I wanted to say it was a really very beautiful, profoundly imaginative reading of Kiki's delivery service seen through Deleuze and Guattari. And yes, I completely resonated with everything that was said. The element of paradox there, which I think here is related to the molar and the molecular, the fact that in a way they coexist. In most of us who are, in the norm, in the patriarchal norm, it's the molar reality that has solidified. But to keep the molecular alive in the molar, to know that the molar is always molecular, is that the basis of a micropolitics? That is one question that I'd like to leave us with, as well as, is that the basis of another kind of community, a becoming which is in relation with being as a alternative community of those who have veered away or form their own kind of future, their own kind of perspectival trans-individual, not transhuman, but post-human collective, so to say, or post-human, assemblage, so to say.
Ritu, I know that it's very hard, but you literally have like 50 seconds to address all of this. You can do it.
Yeah, it's difficult, Devashishda, and yes, thank you for your question. And it is really an intriguing one because, firstly, I must say, yes, molar is always already mediated by the molecular, and that will be the point of departure of our politics, because if we are not thinking, if we are solely thinking in terms of the majoritarian, the molar, and the patriarchal, we would not be able to go beyond that, because we have to sustain, we have to retain that dream and that moment of utopia, and that might come to us as a surprise, as a gift, as certain moments. It might not be very train ourselves, to understand what are, how do we glimpse? Our glimpses should also be trained, because we are so very embedded within the majoritarian that we cannot actually, we are trained to not to think about or not to go beyond, and we are not trained to understand these these nuances of or micro-political nuances. So yes, that is true. And about your second question, that whether it is more about a particular community of people, or of or non-human or post-human or transhuman community, which is more closer to this kind of a dream, or or this kind of both dream and reality, or this kind of lived experiences. So that also to me is really very paradoxical, because so what we are pointing, what we are hinting at here is not merely in terms of empirical or phenomenal beings. Yes, we'll see that in certain phenomenal beings, or certain empirical categories, we'll see that there is a staging, or the kind of post-humanism we are talking about, the kind of possibilities that we are talking about are more apparent, and we can see them maybe. But then the point is, I think our point is beyond that. Our point is more more abstract, or what should I say? It's more epistemologic in nature, and we are to look at the. We are not looking at empirical categories. Basically, we are looking beyond that, and how many other things. So post-humanism always tells us how to think of associations, between several other things. So, the very point of being others. So, it's always, and the politics of multiplicity, and of being fractured. So we cannot actually logically only think in terms of certain the community that holds the possibilities of post-humanism empirically. This is a very
Thank you so much, Ritu. And it's perfect because Ritu is going to chair the next session on queer subjects, so ensure that the conversation can go on. Actually, I did have more questions, for instance, about the importance of the recognition of the third gender in India. So that's something that we can bring to the next panel. So first of all, thank you so much, Ritu, for your beautiful presentation, for answering so many different questions. So I'm going to give a big applause to Ritu. And I'm going actually to give Ritu the words to chair the next session on queer subjects. So thank you so much, Ritu, and everyone, and let's go into the topic of queer subjects in India. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Francesca. Thank you, Debashish.
1 minute, just. I think we decided to take a very short break. I know that we are running out of time, but I think we can come back just after 3-4 minutes.
Yes.
As Ritu decides.
So now it is 8:45. Let's be back by 8:50.
8:48.
8:48. Okay, fine.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you, Debashish.
হ্যাঁ বলো। আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে, আমি কথা বলে নিচ্ছি। আর আমি তো দেখছি ইয়ে ডাইরেক্টলি দেখছে, দাওনি কোশ্চেনগুলো, ওই ফ্রান্সেসকা দেখছে, ঠিক আছে, আমি পড়ে দেবো দরকার। হ্যাঁ অসুবিধা নেই। Should we start?
Yeah, I think so.
Ritu is there. I think she has left.
Ritu has encountered a sort of problem. Just pardon me. I think it's okay. All right now, Ritu.
Ritu has come back. No?
Yeah. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. I have a small announcement to make. There are some technical problems or showing a photograph. So I just want to make people aware of that because that might be difficult. Okay. So the presenters, I'm sorry, because there is some copyright issue that now YouTube is trying to put, and they will stop our streaming that and the video if you are showing any picture or video. That happened when Ritu showed that picture. After that, for a few minutes, it was stopped. Okay, that's my announcement.
Hello.
Yeah.
Sir, actually, I have a question. I'm Abhishek. So in case suppose we have some pictures in our slides and we have mentioned the courtesy, the image courtesy, even then we can't show it?
No, it's
See, we are not
about
sure.
the courtesy because YouTube needs a solid copyright certificate about from where are your sources are, so whether they are letting you use their sources or not. So there has to be a proper certificate for that. That is a whole another issue. So we are not going into that actually. We have some other ways to bypass all this. So it's okay. You if you have any presentation, pictures or videos, it's okay. It will not get banned right now.
Like, I mean, should I remove the pictures from the presentation?
No,
then is
absolutely
that
not necessary. It's you can go with all your pictures and everything.
okay? All right. Okay.
So, okay, we begin this panel. And Shomra, can you just tell me how much time do we have? And we have two panelists, two presenters.
I think we are running short of time. I don't think we can give more than 12 minutes each. 10 to 12 minutes is the time. And then we can have some time for discussion.
Okay.
The presenters can respond the rest to the discussion. Thank you.
So it's okay. And so the first speaker in today's panel is Abhishek Lakkad, and he will be talking on queer terror, techno-science, and the heteronormative nation in Mugan. Abhishek Vikas Lakkad is an independent scholar, and he has done his Ph.D. from the Center for Studies in Science, Technology and Innovation Policy, School of Social Sciences, Central University of Gujarat. Now, please, Abhishek, we won't waste any more time, and please continue.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to share my presentation now. So the title of my paper, I've changed the title of my paper slightly. It's Queer Terror, Technophobia and the Heteronormative Nation in Illumism. So I'll try to keep this quick and short. So basically in this paper, I've tried to offer an analysis of the Tamil science fiction film Mugan. So Mugan is a Tamil word. In English, it translates as two-faced. So basically what I've tried to argue is that there is an ambivalence in the depiction of the queer or the transgender character in the film, which is basically that is the antagonist in the film. So the plot of the film is basically that there's an Indian spy who needs to search and capture or eliminate a transgender criminal scientist who designs a capacity-enhancing drug meant to be sold to terrorist organizations. So I think that this film, the narrative basically articulates anxieties around the boundaries of the nation, the heteronormative human body, and technoscientific knowledge. Or to what extent or in what ways can technoscientific knowledge be developed or used. So to analyze this paper, I combined the concept of sexual exceptionalism, which has been put forth by Jasbir Puar in her book, Terrorist Assemblages, and I've tried to combine that with Rosie Bradoty's conceptualization of post-human subjectivity. So Jasbir Puar talks about sexual exceptionalism in her book, and she's talking in the context of U.S. national security. So and she says that the status of homosexual subjects gets constructed as outlaws, deviants, or terrorists because heterosexuality is regarded as a necessary constitutive factor of national identity. Further, one of the primary ways sexual exceptionalism is executed is through discourses of sexual repression, which lead to geopolitical global mapping of sexual cultural norms. And I've tried to combine this with the idea of post-human subjectivity as put forth by Rosie Bradoty in her 2016 essay, where she pushes for thinking about the post-human subject through the notion of nature-culture continuum, which calls for collapsing the distinctions between humans, animals, and machines, basically thinking in terms of the unity of all matter, whether organic or non-organic, and also incorporating the unprecedented technological mediation of human life. Also, she talks about, she invokes a number of other scholars to suggest or to say that we can conceptualize the sexual diversity of humans and post-gender sexualities by borrowing insights from the sexual systems of non-human species like animals and insects. So I'm just using these ideas to look at the film and to look at how the queer character has been depicted in the film. Actually, there was a video which I was hoping to show, but I don't think I'll be showing that video clip now. Just moving on. So I think to understand or to analyze this film, Mugan, it is important to look at it in conjunction with another Tamil horror film which is called Kanchana. It is also known as Muni 2 Kanchana. So that was released in 2011, which is a horror film. So that film is also actually, talking about, it also has a queer character, transgender character. And maybe I would like to, show some images with regard to that. This is the one. So is this visible to everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, these are some screenshots from Kanchana. So this is a screenshot or an image that basically shows the straight heterosexual protagonist. It frames him with his bike and his cricket kit, basically establishing him as a very masculine kind of a figure, although he's not that masculine. And this is the transgender character that has been shown in Kanchana. So this transgender character has been, what is unique about Kanchana is that this transgender character, she is desirous of getting herself an education in medicine. But somehow, due to circumstances or due to discrimination, actually, she is not able to pursue education in medical science. So when she grows up, she makes sure that she will make efforts so that others like her will get an opportunity to pursue, education in medicine or any other fields, and get better opportunities for professional growth. So in the backdrop, you can see that there's another transgender character. So basically, this character Kanchana, who is standing near the microphone, she helps this other transgender to pursue education in medicine. But however, this transgender, she gets killed, and she comes back for revenge, and she possesses the body of the protagonist or the hero, which I showed in the beginning, and then he starts behaving effeminately. So, but ultimately, once he realizes the kind of the injustice that has happened with Kanchana, he allows her to possess his body to complete her revenge. So kind of so the film basically articulates a kind of an empathy towards the problems that are faced by the transgender community. So I think in that sense, and what is also important about Mugan is that it shows the transgender character in conjunction with scientific knowledge or science and technology, And there is a nice paper that written by Mituras Dusia, and he has analyzed the film Kanchana, and I'm just quoting from his paper that the film Kanchana forces the audience to reflect on the overwhelming power science and biological determinism have wielded over the trans community, and shows this community as both aware of this power and as wanting a structural stake in this power. So I think in this context, I think Mugan takes forward Kanchana's ideological or ethical project insofar as it shows a queer or a transgender character as a custodian of science or scientific knowledge, or a purveyor of science and technology. So like I showed in the images about Kanchana, the same actor is shown as a straight or a heterosexual person, and then he's also, in the latter of the film, he behaves like a like a transgender. Likewise, in Mugan also the same. There is one actor, the same actor Vikram, who plays a heterosexual hero, the raw agent Akilan, and he also portrays the villain Love, who's basically an entrepreneurial scientist but also a criminal mastermind. So here again, I'm sharing some screenshots from the movie Mugan. So the screenshots on the top row, the top two screenshots are basically to establish the heterosexuality of the hero, that is Akilan, the raw agent Akilan, and so basically, and the bottom two screenshots are basically captured from a conversation between Akilan, and on the right side at bottom is basically the queer or the transgender scientist Love. So and in this, so basically Love is a man, but she identifies as a woman. And also, so basically why I'm showing these screenshots is that the narrative very early on, it establishes a kind of a contest between heteronormativity and queer sexuality, and so as shown in the above two screenshots, there's this heterosexual couple, and they are on the verge of getting married, but they are then attacked by Love and her henchmen, and due to which their marriage doesn't really happen, or it happens, but they are not really able to stay together. But yeah, so in this context, the central science fictional artifact of the film is this capacity-enhancing drug, which is called speed, that is filled in asthma inhaler, so that it can be transported around the world without any kind of raising any kind of suspicion. And the person who consumes this drug basically becomes a kind of a superhuman for a short span of time, for like 5 minutes. But I think more than this, what really evokes cognitive estrangement in this film is that the drug is designed and developed by a transgender diasporic Indian scientist, and so in that sense, definitely the film pushes the depiction of queer characters or transgender characters, because it is shown that the character Love is shown as an expert in the ways of modern Western science. She has so I'll come to that point again later. And of course, this her expertise in science, or her expertise as a person of science, is again kind of tempered down by her disposition towards criminal activities, megalomania, and anarchy. So in this sense, there is definitely an ambivalence with regard to the depiction of the character, but definitely it also again pushes the envelope in terms of the depiction. So there are a couple of scenes in the film where which establish basically that Love is a man, but he identifies as a woman. So it's basically, so she thinks of herself as a woman, although she's a man. So there are a couple of scenes, and then one of the scenes, Love proposes to Akilan and says that they both should get together, and then they can rule the world as Akilan as the king and Love as the queen. But of course, Akilan, he's disgusted at this proposal and he turns it down, of course, being the hero. And then there's another scene where Love is imprisoned in Malaysia, and she makes a proposition to another Malaysian police officer that they both can get together, and he will be the king and she can be the queen, and they can stay together. And then later, she somehow manages to escape from the prison, and then we are shown that she's waking up in a women's trial room in a mall. And when she walks out of the trial room, all the women, there are women and young girls waiting outside, for their chance to, try those codes. But they are shocked to see that, there is a man or a transgender walking out of the trial room. And there's a girl who says that, this is a trial room for women. How can you be here? So Love just makes some gesture to convey that, I am not a man, and then he just walks off. So I think that's a very important scene, and that I think conveys some kind of like gender politics of the film, that, this transgender, they are like, they need their own space, and through which they can assert their identity as transgender. Also, Love is shown to have deep knowledge regarding chemical toxins and how it affects human biology. So, in the latter half of in the climax, the Love disguises herself as a nurse. She enters a hospital where she wants to meet a transport minister. So she disguises herself as a nurse, and then she makes her way to the room where this transport minister is kept through an AC ventilation duct, which is shown in the right bottom screenshot. So, and then, she goes ahead. When she reaches that suite, she uses some chemical compounds which she apparently acquires from the hospital, and she creates a toxin which temporarily paralyzes Akilan and the minister, and then she's able to manipulate the situation in her favor, and she escapes from the hospital. So basically these things establish that how the kind of deep scientific knowledge she has, and particularly the knowledge she has about human biology and about chemistry. And this is something I think where the film is creating a dialogue with Kanchana, which I mentioned, that there's this transgender who is desirous of getting education in medicine, and the film kind of forces the audience to think about how biological determinism and medical science have shaped the queer body or affected the queer subjectivity. So I think in that sense, this is where Mugan kind of creates a conversation with Kanchana, and I think it's important to see both these films together or understand them together. So there's also this kind of, we need to also look at the geopolitics of the film, because I think the majority, the film is about Indian characters, but the majority of the digestion takes place in Malaysia. And Malaysia is known as a place which has very strict norms against the LGBTQ community. So there the same-sex relationships have not been decriminalized. So I think throughout the narrative, there are these Indian law and order forces, the Indian spy Akilan and other spies from RNAW, and there is Malaysian police who are chasing or who are going after Love. So, but we can interpret both these forces chasing, or going after Love in different ways. So I'll just read this out. So the film's preoccupation with terrorism, warfare, and national security plays out in the Indian context, but its containment of homosexuality seems to be an allusion to the hostile Malaysian milieu towards the LGBTQ community. But, however, the relevance of the repression of queer sexuality cannot be ruled out in the Indian context, despite the decriminalization. So, this film came out in 2016. That's the same year when Uri attacks happened in India. In fact, the film released just like 10 days before the Uri attacks. So, and then of course, I think it's well known that after the Uri attacks, the Indian government retaliated with what came to be known as surgical strikes. So, in a way, the film kind of, it's like the film's narrative is kind of a premonition about the attacks that are going to happen in India. But then it imagines the enemy of the nation as a transgender, as a scientist and a transgender scientist at that. So that is something very important in terms of the depiction of the queer character. So I think in conclusion, I would like to say that the film's imagination is certainly marked by queer phobia, considering that the narrative chooses to, terminate the transgender scientist as it is, she's the nation's enemy. But Mugan's concerns of national security and misuse of technology hold within them the anxiety regarding non-normative sexuality. And the technophobia, that is the misuse of this drug called speed, that is projected onto the non-normative, the queer sexuality and the otherness of the villain, that is Love. And the film's anxieties regarding the misuse of human enhancement and threats to national security are an extension of the film's latent homophobia. And so, from a critical post-humanist perspective in the Indian context, I think the inculcation of post-humanist subjectivity would entail the collective societal challenge of overcoming homophobia and moving towards a post-gendered country with sexual diversity. So, I would like to end with this screenshot from Mugan. So, despite the decriminalization of same-sex relationships in 2018, I think I think this short somehow speaks to that. I mean, of course, this film came out in 2016. It was released in 2016, but so this is basically the shot that introduces love to the audience in the film, and you can see that their love is captured in her laboratory, and she's wearing a mask and raising a finger on her mouth as if saying that so basically she's wearing a mask and asking or suggesting to stay quiet. So I think this is like, despite the kind of liberation that the LGBTQ community must have felt in 2018, there's still, like, I think there is this mask on their identity is still not fully claimed. So there is this mask of heterosexuality which many of the LGBTQ members are kind of forced to put on in their regular lives, and they are like forced to kind of maintain a silence about their actual gender identity and their sexual orientation. So I think this image definitely speaks to that. So I'm just choosing to end with this image. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abhishek, for your paper. Without much delay, I would call Joya Sarkar, the next presenter. Is she there?
Yes, hi. Just give me a minute to share my screen.
So Joya Sarkar is pursuing her PhD in Cultural Studies in BITS Pilani, Hyderabad campus, and she has edited a book entitled Industrial Melanism, an Evolutionary Reverse Swing, and it was published in 2019. And today she'll be presenting a paper entitled Indian Superscript Cyborg, Deconstructing Normativity Through Feminist Posthumanism. Yes, Joya, please.
Is my screen visible?
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay. Good evening. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to be a part of the symposium, and being able to hear all of the wonderful speakers from all over the world have been a wonderful experience. And to now present here is just an added cherry on the top of the cake. So to begin with, the topic of my presentation is Indian Superscript Cyborg, Deconstructing Normativity Through Feminist Posthumanism. My paper demonstrates how Indian female para-athletes stand beyond the imaginary identifications and frames of mirrored wholeness and antagonism. In the post-colonial scenario, both the biological and the technological female bodies are categorized as the other. Consequently, the female cyborg in Haraway and Rosie Brodotto's sense is considered a cultural and technical transgressor, whose politics is not viewed as a simple mind-body opposition. So my aim would be to trace the noticeable shift in the cyborg ontology and map out how the female Indian para-athletes assume the cyborg's role. Using feminist posthumanism as a framework, my presentation would explore how Indian female para-athletes interrogate the historical exceptionalism given to human man and critiques the unequal social stratifications privileging few human and non-human bodies, modes of being and knowledge over others. In general, the statistics paints a very fearful picture and for the representation of Indian female athletes, and to add disability as another marker, filters a very small number of para-athletes. The feminist interrogation of gender since Simone de Beauvoir has revealed how women are assigned a cluster of ascriptions like Aristotle's concept of the other. Female, disabled, and dark bodies are supposed to be dependent, incomplete, vulnerable, and incompetent bodies, since femininity and race are performances of disability. Rosemary Garland Thompson argues that because women and persons with disabilities are cultural signifiers for the body, their actual bodies have been subjected relentlessly to what Michel Foucault calls discipline. The medical commitment to healing, when coupled with modernity's faith in technology and interventions that control outcomes, has increasingly shifted towards an aggressive intent to fix, regulate, to fix, regulate, or eradicate ostensibly deviant bodies. The visible body then becomes a body whose variations or transformations have rendered it out of sync with its environment, both its physical and the additional attitudinal environments. In Feminist Queer Crypt, Alison Kafer talks about the crypt cyborg politics, inviting feminists to reconsider their common use of disability as a depoliticized metaphor for hybridity, and entreating disability activists to include the critics of class and Western privilege offered by socialist and transnational feminists. Kafer suggests that as discussion of the cyborgs are one of the rare places disability continually appears within feminist texts, disability scholars need to attend to cyborg theory. She highlights the ableism often apparent in this text, with disabled people separated as an essential state of cyborg, which the non-disabled people will never achieve. Indian female para-athletes are subjected to the gaze for being the other in many aspects: non-normativity, belonging to a third world country, and being disabled for being female athletes who are already heavily marginalized. People using prosthetic devices are also stared at by strangers, which further contributes to their psycho-emotional disability. Therefore, viewing the impaired body as a contemporary cyborg also reinforces the discourses of non-normativity because of the way technology tends to recreate the normal body. Armed with one of her prostheses, the para-badminton player Manashi Joshi became an incarnation of femininity and a superhero, a cultural cyborg overcoming biological deficiencies. She challenges people's perception of limiting disabilities and the impact of this on social status by redesigning possibilities for the body. As an amputee, she has been able to turn her bodily constraints on its head. A prosthetic leg allowed her to redesign the assemblage of her body. Shalini Saraswati, she is a quadruple amputee and is known as the Blade Runner because of the prosthetic blades she uses for walking and running. She has trained extensively and struggled because of the heavy prosthetics, but continued till she ran a 10-kilometer marathon for 2 consecutive years and is now an accomplished para-athlete. Another Blade Runner is Kiran Kenogia, who put on a prosthetic leg after her leg was amputated. Since 2014, she had been running marathons in India and abroad. Deliberately exploring the issue of modern identity, combining technology and avant-garde, these 3 female para-athletes changed emancipatory disability narration from cliched Helen Keller stories to feminist post-humanism. These female para-athletes designate the future prototype of a human, part technology. As Francesca Ferrando remarked the other day, that technology is now recognized ontologically. With that, these para-athletes combine natural and artificial instead of juxtaposing these notions, and by doing so, they highlight a new body image for women and new adaptation patterns for disabled people. Additionally, there is also the reclaiming of their own bodies, taking control of it. These para-athletes highlight the significance of reflecting one's personality through an altered body image. Their prostheses wield superpower, but their connotations with new identity and individuality are more important. Encouraging people to stand up for themselves. Paraplegics and severely handicapped people have the most intense experiences of complex hybridization with technology. In the recent past, the Indian female para-athletes have formed an intimate relationship with technology in the form of using prosthetics and implants or assistive devices. However, at the same time, disabled people are among the poorest group in the society, and particularly the female para-athletes from India belong to the lowest economic strata. So the access to adequate prosthetics or technology so that they can participate in society as an active citizen is seriously curtailed. Therefore, enhancements in technology do not always relate to improvements in the quality of life of disabled people. Technology is a capitalist social entity which in Indian culture is shaped and informed by market forces and the requirements of powerful vested interest. Further, the cyborg has always been closely entangled with capitalism. After Robert Wiener invented the term cybernetic to refer to the self-correcting weapon systems he had been developing during and after the Second World War, there has been a prominent shift in the ontology of the cyborg. from the mechanical to the biological, and from a fabricated entity to a synthetic organic creature. Nevertheless, throughout that shift, capitalism is inherently entangled with the figure of the cyborg. It could be argued that in these female para-athletes, we see techno-bodies, bodies that transcends the biological limitations of human bodies. Techno-bodies are portrayed as cyborgs since they are enhanced using prosthetics for achieving corporeal reimaginings. The cyborg identity do not conform to the social and cultural ideals and refuses to be defined by the predetermined racist and sexist social roles. The cyborg, a chimera in Donna Haraway's terms, resists all the categorizations put forth by humanism. Donna Haraway's A Cyborg Manifesto introduced the cyborg as a figure of transcased boundaries, potent fusions, and dangerous possibilities. Cyborgs unsettle the traditional humanist order by creating new modes of assemblage which undermine the existing hierarchies and binaries. The hybridized identity of sex. The para-athletes as cyborgs concede control of the vital entities of their professions to the machines and systems. The posthuman emerges not as the obsolescence of the human, but as a form of resistance against the long-established binaries of self and non-self, order and non-equilibrium, normativity and non-normativity. Posthumanism often deconstructs the ontological foundations of the Enlightenment subject, going against the Cartesian concept of the mind-body dualism and the liberal subject. The cyborg para-athletes become subjects who embody multiplicity, in part by releasing the body from the constraints placed on it, not only by nature, but also by humanist ideology, and allowing it to roam free and join with other beings, animate and inanimate. The unconstrained posthuman embodiment is thus composed of many subjects in relations to power, technology, virtuality, and reality. In Paralympic sports, the cyborg athletes are seen as super crips. Ronald Berger mentions that super crips are those individuals whose inspirational stories of courage, dedication, and hard work prove that it can be done, that one can defy the odds and accomplish the impossible. As in the case of Mansi, Shalini, and Kiran, they also gain a relatively high media exposure. Para-athletes with cybernetic sporting bodies, when appear on the athletic tracks, instantly draw much attention and are considered to be the most successful. The use of the prosthetic technologies has led to a litany of super crip stories, which often leave the observer with a sense of impossible achievement. However, those para-athletes who do not receive recognition in mainstream media are not labeled as super crips and are often marginalized. At the same time, there is also the possibility that the label of super crip can be negatively bestowed upon impaired individuals who just manage to live an ordinary life. So often persons with disabilities receive patronizing super status just by living a normal life, and thus the tag of super crip becomes a double-edged sword. It becomes a matter of concern when the success stories of the super crips foster unrealistic expectations about what people with locomotor disabilities can achieve and what they should be able to achieve. Looking at these para-athletes from the feminist post-humanist approach makes each of them a unique individual with a unique set of bodies, spaces, materialities, and objectivities. By decentering the normative image of athletes, feminist posthumanism aims to be ethically responsible to human and non-human entanglements and multispacious urgencies. Posthuman thinking is characterized by what Dorothy refers to as transversal, that is multidirectional rather than linear movements. Humanist thinking valorizes linear chronological time and forward-moving progress narratives, but feminist posthumanism moves away from more traditional social science notions of human actors set in dialectical relationships with social structures. When the politics of location, creativity, intensity, and passion are introduced, they play a major role in the process of building oppositional consciousness, making criticism and creativity to be ways of resistance. Heidegger's concept of the subject, as it is saying, is a dynamic way of being, an ongoing movement.
Sorry to interrupt, Joya. Will you
I'm
please?
just done. Yeah. An ongoing movement which is in tandem with its own being and to the world. Heidegger argues that self hood is evolving in keeping with past experiences, present context, and future projects. The posthumanist consciousness is thus precisely to warrant this kind of fulfillment and to provide the self with a bionic prosthesis utilizable to redefine its selflessness without surrendering to the mission completely. The self, subject, and subjectivity becomes entangled. Their embodied subjectivities represent the grotesque configurations of the feminine and defies the stereotypical notions of beauty and ideal goddess-like figure. A feminist post-human approach to this goes beyond just raising the concerns about the inclusion of women in sports, but demands agentic relations between humans, visibility, technology, and non-normativity. In fact, they become agents who profoundly restructure the processes of sexualization, racialization, and naturalization as pillars of the biopolitical governmentality. These Indian female para-athletes thus demonstrate a posthumanism which acknowledges their political agency and more adequately captures the entangled nature of oppressions and resistance. Thank you.
Thanks. Teaching papers, one questioning the depiction of queer in the mainstream Tamil cinema, while the other thinking of the post-human possibilities opened up in the negotiations of Indian para-athletes. And both of the papers are interesting, and I'll just want to take up questions from the house, and it's open. So we'll now take up questions from initially from all of us who are here present, and then we'll take up questions from YouTube. And is the YouTube working?
Yeah, it is working fine.
I think Anirbanda has a question.
Okay. So Anirbanda,
hello. I think it's from the earlier thing. I didn't want to ask a question now. I think it's from the earlier session, the hand that is being shown.
So,
I have a question. Not a question, like a comment also. Yeah. I was just thinking about the threat of denaturalization, the unnatural, denatural body in case of the queer subject, and also the threat of denaturalization which is there in case of technology. I think they are both combining in the film which has been discussed, where technology in the first paper, in the first presentation. So I was just thinking about that how these two threads, they combine together, and how the myth of naturalization comes as a barrier of accepting that denatural. The denatural may be the man or a woman, also in case of the second presentation, and the denaturalization provided by technology, science, etc. Thank you.
Abhishek, do you want to go first?
Yeah, okay. So, I'm not sure I understood the question completely. So what you are asking is that how the denaturalization due to technology and the denaturalization brought about by the queer body, how they combine with each other. Is that the question?
Yeah. And they both, in a way, challenge the myth of naturalization. The natural body, the natural subject.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least from a critical post-humanist perspective, which incorporates subjectivity as well as ontology, and especially and including ontology along with the incorporating the unprecedented technological mediation that is happening of the human body. So I think in that sense, yes, I mean, I think that is what the critical post-humanist position is all about, to actually look at, to denaturalize or to denaturalize things, or to kind of subvert the dominant positions or ideas that we carry in our day-to-day lives. So in that sense, yeah, the queer body, challenges this, the heteronormativity, which is extremely dominant in society, right? I mean, heterosexuality is kind of an essence of human existence. And in that sense, the queer body subject challenges this notion that heterosexuality is the essence of human existence in various ways, I mean, so it's not that just that a man and woman can be partners, but a man and another man, or two women can also be partners. And also and especially in the case of the female queer body, I think it's also about, or even in the case of the male queer body, I think it's also about, the notion of, because heterosexuality or the heteronormativity is invariably connected with the idea of the family, right? Because family is like the fundamental organizing unit of, at least of Indian society. So the idea, and that is invariably linked with heterosexuality. But the queer subjects, they are moving beyond that in terms of denaturalization, because they are, adopting all these newer kinds of artificial reproductive techniques or other kinds of reproductive technologies to actually, have a family and feel parenthood. And so in that sense, yeah, definitely they challenge the normative or the naturalized position of heterosexuality. And likewise with, I think also in the case of, technological mediation, like the cyborg body also, I mean, the idea that human is made, or human ontology is something like just flesh and bones. I think critical post-humanist position, I think it asks us to discard that idea and, asks us to conceptualize embodiment in terms of, that our body doesn't end at our skin. The things that are beyond our skin, whether it's organic materiality or non-organic materiality, whether it's animals, plants, machines, intelligent machines, or the whole environment, nature, embodiment is constructed by all of these things together, and in which technology is just one aspect. So I think in that sense, yeah, definitely, both these positions, they challenge the naturalized or dominant ideas of existence. So I think that's how I would like to respond to it. Thank you for the question.
I completely agree with what Abhishek said, and just to add to that is naturalization, denaturalization is yes, as soon as we are talking about a cybernetic body, there is a kind of denaturalization, because there is what is happening, there is a reorganization of the or reassemblage what is happening. So in the terms of Deleuze and Guattari, the organicity of the body is getting reassembled here, and that in a way already denaturalizes the biological organicity which we know or acquainted with. So yes, as soon as we are talking about the post-human body, the denaturalization automatically happens. And through this denaturalization, again taking from Dr. Ferrando's talk from the other day, is that the post-humanism is being manifested. Not only we are talking in the theoretical sense anymore, but we see in these bodies that there is a manifestation of the post-humanism happening.
So here we can see that Onindo has a question. Onindo, why don't you, you want me to read it out, or you can ask
No,
it?
I can speak. Yeah. Thank you very much for wonderful papers. I'm sort of deviating a bit, but this Abhishek's talk made me think about this. As a biologist, I have started to question whether nurture and nature, and Abhishek, of course, spoke in the, with regard to homosexuality or same-sex relationships, but even otherwise, and it comes to mind when we look at human, non-human, and this idea that the human is basically a cultural being, whereas a non-human, and I mean animals here, is more a biological being. And this divide, I think, seems to be one that one can potentially question in various ways. I question it in terms of biological phenomena, and I can give some examples later if time permits. But I was wondering whether posthumanism, and I'm a new entrant in this area, so excuse me, please, but has posthumanism reflected on it? Is it important to, if we break this divide, are we making a little bit of a headway into a deeper understandings of being or looking at the post-human? Would anyone like to comment on this?
So should I go first? So I think what comes to my mind is, and after reading your question, is that, I think Donna Haraway, I think, had first brought in this term called nature-culture continuum, or natural cultural. In an adjectival form, nature culture becomes natural cultural. So I think, yeah, so like looking at it from Donna Haraway's philosophy, and also later on the term was also taken up by, I think, Rosie Bradotti in her work in 2013, the post-human book. I think, yeah, I think when we are talking about nature-nurture divide, I think that is itself, I think it is something that is subsumed when we talk about nature-culture continuum, where we are talking in a, kind of unity of...
Abhishek, sorry. Okay. Sorry, Abhishek, just to interrupt, are we talking of nature-culture continuum just as a meeting point of the two, or are we talking of one merging into the other, where one cannot distinguish one from the other? Just a clarification.
And this is the second point which you made, that where we can't distinguish from nature and culture. So basically, culture is nature and nature is culture. And that is the kind of perspective that we need to adopt when we are taking a post-human approach, I think. And the same with like what you mentioned about nature-nurture. So nurture is nature and nature is nurture. So, so let us say if you're talking about kind of undermining or subverting some kind of dominant ideologies or positions in society. So definitely we are trying to inculcate a mindset where we are trying to nurture ourselves to think that, we should think of other alternative positions instead of thinking of this one stereotypical or dominant position. So I think, yeah, in that way, nature and nurture can be seen as same. So I think that's how I would like to think of it.
Thanks, that's very nice. Thank you.
I just want to add one small thing to what Abhishek said, is that now from where we began, as I mentioned in the presentation, from the very time when cyborg was manufactured during the Second World War. So now what we have arrived to at is a cultural cyborg, is a cultural post-humanist figure. So the very fact that the nature, again, I also agree with the second point, that there is a point where we cannot distinguish the nature and culture anymore. And because of the nature, the culture has allowed us to look at the post-human figure or at the cybernetic being as something which is a part of the nature as well as the culture right now.
So I can see Francesca has a question, and I think that it's going to be the last question because Shamrat has already written that we need to conclude the session. So yes, Francesca, please.
Yeah, and while I'm asking the question, I'm probably going to add a little bit to the conversation and to the question from India. So yes, it's true that, like if we go from the cyborg, natural cultures are really becoming merged. But I also like very much to bring a criticism to the notion of the cyborg that came from the Vandana Shiva in the 90s. And I think her point was really important when she was talking about GMOs, genetically modified organisms. And she was talking specifically about, for instance, GV cotton in India and how that was invasive to other areas and how had such a dramatic effect on the life of many peasants who actually took their life because they could no longer pay for the seeds. So she says, well, the notion of the cyborg comes from a perspective that locates itself in the postmodern approach, but in the end goes really well with these biotechnological, with big biotech companies. Because once you deconstruct completely that dichotomy, she says the only one who gain any profit is the human. Because the only one who gain any profit by saying there is no separation between nature and culture is the human who say, well, then a genetically modified organism is equivalent to a natural one. So I would like to say that, yes, the notion of the cyborg is very important, but we need always to locate it in a very anthropocentric, capitalistic society and not take it for granted. And I think that Vandana Shiva, although her criticism in the 90s, is still very relevant. But my question actually was another one. So thanks so much, both Abhishek and Jaya, for this beautiful presentation and actually for talking about such an important topic as queer subjects. My question is to both of you as experts in this topic. And I was very impressed in 2014 when the Supreme Court in India recognized the IJRA, which is transgender people, eunuchs, intersex, as the third gender in law. So now it's been 6 years, more than 7 years since this recognition. So I was wondering if there was an impact of the legislation to social-political structures and power dynamics, and also that to connect it to the mythological, the kinner aspect. And I know that the Ishra community in India prefer to be referred as kinner or kinner, which is the mythological beings that excel at song and dance. So my question is, on one side is maybe the mythological roots, and on the other side, if there was an impact that not only at the legal level, which is very important, but sometimes we know that laws are not enough to change deep patriarchal and heteronormative political structures.
Ritu, I had just can I make one sentence comment to Francesca about Vandana Shiva?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course.
Yes. So Francesca, it's an interesting thought, but the argument that has been raised against this is that although we are focusing on genetically modified crops and organisms, let us not forget that our entire history of agricultural technology has led to genetically modified individuals. In this case, perhaps plants, animals, all our domestic species have been genetically modified. And so it's just of the technique through natural experiments in the wild. And I think, therefore, that can also be looked upon as a continuum, though the questions of who benefits is an extremely potent and an important question that continues to disturb us. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I just wanted to add something to this because I think what Francesca was saying is that she wants to read this, dissolution of the nature-culture divide, dissolution of binary in deconstructive terms. And in the true spirit of deconstruction, we'll see that there is also a retention of the categories, because unless and until, it is a question of responsible reading, where you also retain the categories you want to dissolve. It's not actually a dissolution of, of the categories. So here, it's a very, very important point that Francesca has raised, that it's not a mere, dissolution of the divide between nature and culture, because that dissolution would is politically would not remain a politically responsible move on our part.
Thank you so much. And if I just add one more layer, and thank you so much both India and Ritu to add into this important aspect. I think that Vandana Shiva's point is really relevant, because it's true in India what you said, that these technologies, if you look at the history of agriculture, have always been on some level developed. But she underlines something that is, I think, very much important also when we reflect on technology nowadays. So now when we talk about technology, we cannot forget that we live in big data economies. For instance, Shoshana Zuboff talked about the age of surveillance capitalism. So we are not just manifesting some type of technologies, but they are connected to a specific economic paradigm. So she does the same about agriculture. So of course, yeah, she's also against those type of biotechnology, but she also says, well, that's not really the point. And she brings a very good example, which I think I would like to share, is the golden rice. So she said, golden rice was created for, between the commas, humanitarian purposes. But then if we look at it, they were not patented under the commons. It was copyrighted. So she said, and that was actually what happened. You give golden rice for free for the first couple of years. All of a sudden, when all the school system, which actually happened in the Philippines, it didn't happen in India because India didn't accept it. But when all the school system accepted, all of a sudden, this company are saying, wait a second, this rice is copyrighted by us. Now you have to pay for it. So I think that her point, although you're right, she's also against in general those type of biotechnology, she's underlying the economic aspect of that. And that is something that we really need to take into consideration also about technologies, because we are now seeing the same in the big data economy, where everything about even this conversation, everything is going to be solved. Not just what we say, the way we type, the colors behind our screen, everything. So if you want to look more into that, again, that book is fantastic. Shoshana Zuboff is a professor at Harvard University, and she wrote this, The Age of Surveillance Capital, and it makes it very clear, because the whole point, for instance, about these companies is creating a way that it becomes very opaque. It's not very clear what's really happening, because then we are left in the unknown, and we just don't know what all this data is worth. Data is nowadays considered the oil, the gold of the 21st century. But yeah, I think that Vandana Shiva is very good at not just talking about ontological things. She talks about the economic interest behind it. And for instance, why a seed should not be able to regenerate itself, just for economic reason, because then you have to buy them again and again and again and again. So you can become, a slave, maybe is too much of a word, but you are going to enchain yourself to this company for the rest of your life, because seeds naturally would regenerate themselves, but these biotech seeds do not. So you have to keep buying them from these companies. So yeah, I think, Anindya, you're right, but the economic aspect also should be taken into consideration.
Okay, so we come to end. It has been a very extremely enriching discussion, and I do thank Abhishek, Joya, and all others who are present here. And I think we'll end this session here and move on to the next part. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm extremely sorry for these interruptions, but we have to conclude, because in India this will gradually approach the dinner time, and our technical support also has to be relieved, because they are already working hard throughout the day. Rather, there are some technical hitches also. So, Devashishda, can you please moderate the panel and start our roundtable? Thank you.
Sure, Shamrat. I think we can go directly into it. I think we can start directly. So, welcome everybody. We now come to the last section of our symposium. This section was titled Roundtable on Envisioning Post-Humanist Futures. But given the fact that this is the inaugural symposium of the Indian Post-Human Network, it will be more in the nature of assessing the symposium and looking forward, envisioning the future of the network. 6 keynotes and 6 panels of excellent papers have been concluded successfully against many odds. All around, the pandemic is raging. Several of our selected participants could not attend due to that. Moreover, we faced major technological challenges and continue to face. But with all our collective goodwill, the symposium went ahead and became a great learning experience for many. We are really heartened by the response of so many of you who have made this event a success. We need to stress that no fees were charged for attending and no fees were paid for organizing and administering this event. It's an entirely free event. But there are overheads to cover, and in the future we may reach out for donations or token payments to cover these. As we continue to discuss the symposium, I would request you as the audience to add your feedback in the chat box. What did you think of the symposium? What did you like in it? And what would you recommend we do differently if we do it again? We will take your feedback with us for future planning. Our symposium was made largely possible by help from our friends at the Center for Comparative Social Theory of the Department of Sociology, West Bengal State University, our co-organizers, and I wish to reach out to its directorial advisor and its director, respectively Dr. Anirban Das and Dr. Ritu Chaudhuri, if they would say a few words to briefly share their feedback. Anirbandha, please.
Anirbandha,
Ritu, why don't you go first, since Anirbandha may not be here.
Yeah. So, I'm thankful to all of you. Let me express my extreme gratitude to all of you, because it has really been a learning experience for me, because the kind of scholarship and the kind of the scholars who have presented here are extremely well read, and also the papers that have been presented are extremely good. So it has been a very good discussion, and kind of insight with the discussion, which is extremely insightful and thought-provoking. So that indeed is a learning experience for all of us, and it's a very places across time zones, across borders, and that's also commendable. And actually, I look forward to other occasions of collaborating with you all, and it's really been a very, very enriching experience for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Das?
No. Thank you. Just often for the moment, I really don't have a suggestion, that sort of thing. I also definitely very much enjoyed the whole thing, and it's really the amount of effort it needed, the amount of dedication it needed from everyone, especially the team from Indian Posthumanism group, Shamrat, Monirul, Devashista, Francesca, every one of you, the way you have set it up, it's fantastic. And probably this, in a way, this was a very interesting attempt, because this is as it is already mentioned, that it's an inaugural conference. So it inaugurates the posthumanism in India, that whole endeavor. So, and in that way, I think it's very successful, because definitely on the one hand, there were so many people who are so well read, thinking about this. But I was really fascinated by the quality of the papers, which the new people, the students, they came up with. And maybe at some other point, we may have certain little more of a workshop format sometimes, but that would complement this. This is not to say that this is something which this event lacked, but to complement this event, I think sometimes we may come up with a little pedagogic format in a certain way, but which definitely will also have we will learn from that, and maybe later on we definitely will reach out to say the other theoretical endeavors that are going on in the subcontinent itself. I have for now maybe the Lusian group that is operating there in India already for some time. Maybe some other groups are also because one thing is that in India we really know that the focus of the academia is very much on like historical and ethnographic studies about aspects to work on like this conceptual and theoretical basis, but which definitely always go on like communicating with the very grounded empirical works that have been done. So thank you. For now, I just thank everyone for being here and making this to me like such a success. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Chaudhuri, and thank you, Professor Das. At this point, I will turn to Professor Shamrat Chengupto, Assistant Professor and Head of Department of English at Shammilani Mahavidyalaya, and one of my co-founders of the Indian Posthumanism Network, to respond to the symposium panels. He will be followed by Professor Muhammad Monirul Islam, Assistant Professor of English at Presidency University. Dr. Chengupto, if you would please give us your response.
Thank you, Debashish Da. I thank all my co-organizers, Monirul, Anirbanda, Ritu, all present here, Francesca, of course. Francesca was a very important endeavor behind this conference and also behind this network. So what I want to say is that about the conjunction, about the conference in general, there have been so many exciting panels. I enjoyed most of the papers thoroughly. They have talked about post-humanism from a theoretical perspective, as Anirbanda already said, but they have already also used enough empirics. I will also talk about, I just want to mention one thing, that is, we also need to talk about the limits and how we can go beyond the limits, what the other things which can be discussed more. So I will talk about that briefly. One thing is like, when we talk about post-humanism, there is a tendency to, think of it as positively, as something which will help us to move beyond the limits of the human. One thing which I need to think, and we all need to think, is that the conjunction between humanism and post-humanism, as it has repeatedly come up in the discussion, particularly in the last few hours, is that we have to think about the conjunction between human and the post-human, because doing away with the human can push us towards the threat of the post-human being appropriated in a new way. The post-technological world, the algorithmic governmentality. I was reading the new book by, the last book by, I think this is the last book, by Stigler on Neganthropocene, and he was mentioning this term, algorithmic governmentality. So technology and man, human, non-human relationship is not always about a positivity. The next thing is about the political aspect. I think we need to focus more about the political aspect that has come repeatedly in the papers on the West, the Gandhi's take on the environment, and in many of the papers it has come repeatedly. About the gender aspect, it has come repeatedly, but then we need to discuss it in further detail about the global biopolitics and its role in appropriating the post-human in the current scenario. Because the post-human, the two directions of post-human is, one is the digital data control, the other is the Anthropocene. And both have a tendency to, think about the future as totally bleak. So how we can confront this bleakness? On one hand, we have to think about the impossible which is wired in the notion of the post-human. On the other hand, we should also think about the way of overcoming these limits, of thinking beyond this total kind of nihilism. We have to think through the nihilism, but also have to think beyond it. And one last point I want to mention is the conjunction between post-humanism and India. We need to examine and rethink this conjunction. There have been so many papers. There's been papers on Tantra. There's been paper on the Dalit way of living with the West. There have been papers on yoga. We can see yoga, Tantra, all these things are coming. And we need more papers on maybe the tribal economy and the tribal way of understanding the post-human. But one thing is, we should not fetishize India. It has come up in the discussion. But again, I am saying that we should not fetishize the category called India, and we should read it in conjunction with the global post-human theory, critical theory, because there is a different way of coming together of the West and the East, if we believe in these categories at all, in the global, in the era of globalization, global networks of knowledge. Then the relationship between the human and the post-human, it can be like reconfigured, and the relationship of the West and the East can also be reconfigured away from the Orientalist way of looking at the East, because the Western theories are challenging the Enlightenment idea of reason, idea of the human, idea of the mind-body dialect, and so we are reading back into the Indian traditions. So with this positive note, I pass on to Devashishda and maybe the next panelist.
Monirul, please, would you share with us your response to the symposium?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Devashishda. And at the very outset, I would like to thank everybody who cooperated all through the 4 days and been with us and made this symposium success. Okay. Now, this session, as Devashishda had said, is a kind of afterthought. And I will try to think aloud, say, to the symposium, and would like to add some points to what Samrat has already said. I agree with Samrat that, the human, the non-human other, and the technology, the machinic other, so to say, whatever way you put it. I mean, we need not think of it as a kind of pyramid, human at the top and then the other two at the bottom, maybe of a triangle, but rather you can think of it in a kind of circular way, or in a linear, positioned in a linear way, and that would be the kind of post-humanist understanding that we are trying to make. Now, I want to make 3 or 4 points very briefly, if time allows me to. Now, when we conceived of the conference, we conceived it keeping in mind the question of that what do you do when we do post-humanism in India? I mean, why do you do post-humanism? Why should we do post-humanism in India? When I think about this question, I do also think about India's colonial past and the post-colonial theories' engagement with different forms of inequality in post-colonial India, and then also, in a sense, like kind of inadequacy of this. And a lack of, say, attention to the continuation of anthropo-colonial model of development in post-colonial India might be a reason behind the kind of inadequacy that we notice in understanding the different forms of inequality existing in the post-colonial Indian society. We started with the keynote of Pankaj Sexeria on the very first day, and he was talking about the Andaman Nicobar Islands, and he was talking about the tribal population of the islands who can be conceived as victims of the Anthropocene. So it's a revealing example of the fact that we need the post-humanist, post-anthropocentric approach to understand the problems existing in the Indian society. Sexeria indicated the need for attending to the non-human entanglements to understand such problems. Actually, what emerges from it is the necessity for the post-humanist thinkers to study and address the policy decision of the post-colonial Indian governments, and such questions, is more relevant now, I think more than ever, with the present regime's complete disregard for the geological and the ecological factors while taking a policy decision. We had quite a few papers actually that adjusted, tried to suggest, think through rather the questions in their own unique way. And we can recall, I know, Soumili Das's paper of Levin's paper in the context and the way they engage with Gandhi's thoughts from two opposed, contradictory perspectives. The Soumili's paper also pivots around the pressing issue of the caste question. I mean, this can be one of the important issues for future explorations for us. I mean, I'm looking forward to more such papers to see how things unfold in relation to the caste question and the post-humanist discourses. However, we should remember that there are many other facets of this interface between the post-human and the post-colonial. And so we course paper with its focus on, say, the colonial and post-colonial construction of femininity, made another dimension very, very clear to us. So the symposium has already made it clear that post-humanism can play a vital role in reassessing and readdressing, say, the forms of discriminations based on caste, religion, gender, class, etc., in the Indian or in the subcontinental context. So we look forward to many such engagements in the future. In this context, actually, I would also like to mention surrounding this as Keynote Address, Professor Sinha's thoughts on the macaque and human interaction in the urban setting underscored the possibility, say, of an empathetic bonding of the humans and the non-human other. The kind of hope the paper actually inspires or generates, I think it opens up a new avenue to think through the Anthropocene. It speaks for a praxis, a kind of, you can say, praxis of love, and we can consider it as a kind of antidote to the politics and praxis of hate and discrimination. I mean, it can provide a kind of healing touch. Secondly, I would point to the fact that when you think of the post-human, post-colonial interface, there are a number of objections against post-humanism from the post-colonial and decolonial theories for the Eurocentric nature of the post-humanist. I mean, they say that, the parochial Eurocentric nature of post-humanist theories. In other words, the geopolitics of knowledge that they point to. Now, post-humanists always claim that it's post-humanism is a global, local movement, a kind of decentered and diffused episteme that it forwards. Now, I see the keynote panel, a keynote on the panel this morning on yoga and tantra as a praxis of the localized and the contextualized form of post-humanism, and forming a kind of answer to the, say, allegation that post-humanism is myopic in its vision. So one important point, however, as Samrat was, trying to point to remember that, going back to indigenous roots might be fraught with certain kind of problems, problems of maybe getting appropriated. So it requires a kind of alertness on our part, so to say, and some of the papers on the holy cow have revealed this aspect. I mean, we need to be alert. And when you think of this alertness, and then another issue come to my mind, and Samrat was pointing to this issue as well. The understanding, say, and countering the opportunist turn in post-human thought, the nexus of technology and capital, that may consolidate the discriminatory hegemony. I mean, we need to be aware of that. We didn't have, many papers on technology and the human non-human interface. We couldn't explore it in that detail, but even in the today's session, I mean, that just we had, it was so illuminating and interesting from this point of view. And also we had Amit and Dever's paper earlier. So the intervention of technology in its different dimensions, I think, one of the important way forward. I mean, when you think of the engagement of the post-humanists when it comes to India. So I finally like to conclude with the question of pedagogy. I mean, I make this point because most of us here are teachers, scholars, maybe would-be teachers and students. Now, this point is rather inspired by the young scholar Suparna's paper, who raised some issues regarding the role of academia in liberating the space for critical thinking. Her paper actually inspires me to think about the things, the situation we are in, rather. The pedagogy we practice has become hugely technology mediated with the pandemic and the kind of constraints it imposes on us. And it is a kind of, say, perfect ambience for MCQization, as you put it, and limiting our choices. Also, we are engaging in our virtual avatars and perhaps making it easier for surveillance agencies to control and contain our pedagogical practices and say, our pedagogies of dissent, so to say. So on the positive note, however, I must mention that, we are able to make this completely non-profit symposium happen because we are conducting it online using the digital platform. So, the enabling and the disabling aspects, we should consider both of them. So, however, final point is that I'd like to point to another very important dimension in relation to pedagogy. And I think, that has emerged in the process of the symposium, that the necessity to bridge the differences, the gaps between the humanities and the science. If we think of a post-human pedagogy of humility, I think we must do away with the two cultures approach. The kind of gathering we had in the symposium obviously is suggestive of this. And I thanking everybody once again, I end on this positive note and look forward to many such future interactions. Thank you all.
Thank you, Professor Shemukto and Professor Munirul Islam. Academic symposia and conferences occur throughout the year like routine seasonal events, and academics circulate through these in equally routine form. They come and go, greeting and parting, and leaving little mark except a wrinkle of the moment. Our intention with this symposium was a little different. Not that we expect that the talks will remain ingrained in the minds of the audience forever, but for us, such events take their significance as an attempt to build collective understanding. A mix of young and recognized scholars presented in this symposium, and many scholars and laypersons interested in the topic attended. All the papers of the symposium are archived in the website posthumanism.in and can be read at your leisure there. If you subscribe to the website, you can also comment or ask questions for any of these papers. We really encourage you to do so. The subscribe link can be found at the top left corner of the website. Many audience members tried to comment or raise questions during the symposium, but couldn't be accommodated due to lack of time. Moreover, the network hopes to foster scholarship by providing opportunities for conversation. A lot of these talks that have been given could benefit a lot more from discussion. This is how the afterlife of a symposium like this can be more useful. Our intention is to foster a community of scholarship. There is no requirement to become a subscriber and comment or converse on posts. So we encourage you to subscribe. To become a member, there is a membership area in the website which takes applications from scholars in the area of Indian posthumanism. Some of our audience have been writing into the chat box, and we encourage you to look at those. We will also look at them and actually take them with us for discussion. I'm not going to read them because we are really running short of time. I would now like to turn to Professor Francesca Ferrando, well-known post-humanist scholar, author of philosophical post-humanism, who teaches philosophy at the New York University and is one of our co-founders, and in fact, the inspirer of the Indian Post-Humanism Network. She is the founder of the Global Post-Human Network, of which we see ourselves as a part. Dr. Ferrando, please share with us a few words about your vision with the Global Post-Human Network and the Indian Post-Human Network as a part of this larger constellation.
Well, Debashish, first of all, thank you so much, everyone, Debashish, Shamrat, Monirul, Ritu, Anirban, and everyone who created such an incredible conference in such an intense moment for India and for everyone on the planet Earth. So this unique experience has been the manifestation of a vision that Debashish and I and others, Shamrat and Monirul, have been nourishing for the last 6 months. And it's a vision that started many years ago. So on one side, I would like to underline here the power of manifestation. The power of manifestation that comes also in the title and subtitle of our conference, Envisioning and Manifesting. In that sense, I would like to connect to what Monirul was expressing, kind of the need also to envision a post-human pedagogy. And in that sense, I love the conference. I think that was an incredible presence, again, in this moment of deep, deep re-envisioning and sorrow for humankind. But I also would like to express, maybe for the next conference, I would love to experiment more with other ways of developing knowledge. And I'm going to try a small exercise now together, but I think that it would be very, of course now this was an online conference, so this was excellent. Also, we wanted to have maybe small groups developing ideas, which was hard to do with Google Meets, which was the first platform we were considering. So this was a great experience to learn, to share, to create the network, which is, I think, is even more important than the debate itself. Because I think that at the core of this vision is connecting, being in dialogue, being with others, because this is the core message of existence in order to survive. So this is not just a conference, as everyone has underlined. This is an inaugural symposium of the Indian Posthumanist Network. And I really want to underline the importance of connecting. I also want to underline here the fact that there is no a universal message that someone who joined the network has to accept in any way. The idea of being posthuman is being posthuman the way you are, the way you feel comfortable with yourself, with your existence. But of course, the requirement, which is, I think, an existential requirement, is being in dialogue with others, considering questions, thinking together. And this is, I think, the power of the birth of this project. So in that sense, I would like to start thinking of possible way of experimenting. So I'm going to end my short notes in a second with a short experiment. But first, I would like to say that, sorry about that. The post-human existence. Let me just get rid of Skype. Okay, with Skype. Okay. Manifesting through the physical presence. So I wanted to say one more thing. The Indian Posthumanist Network is a great experience and experiment for everyone, not just for India. As Debashish was kindly mentioning, is part of the Global Posthuman Network. We have many networks of people who want to think together and ask questions together in posthuman terms, which is, I think, the base of the idea of being together. And a lot of these people are now looking at the Indian experience as a place of departure. So, for instance, now the Latin American Posthuman Network is forming, and the posthuman conference that we had in India is going to be one of the examples that we're going to bring in order to really explore ideas. Because as all of you really underline here, there are different dynamics at work. And it's not just the global. I love Dipash Chakraborty, who is also in our board. He's part of the academic board of the Global Posthuman Network. And he clarified the idea of the globe is the result of colonial times. The idea of the globe as something that can be circumnavigated. But here, of course, at first, the network was called Local Posthuman Network, and then everyone was getting confused. So we decided to adopt this notion in an open way that, as Munir was saying, is not global, is local and global at the same time. And we are learning from each other, from our experiences in open ways. So India is going to bring so much to the conversation, as much as the Latin American network is going to do, and the Korean posthuman scholars that we are already doing. So the idea is not so much the pride of, the nationalistic pride, which is really not part of the posthumanist approach, but the idea that everyone has deep, rich sources of wisdom that we can connect with. And we are teachers and learners always, always. The last teaching is probably going to be death, as the last final experience of at least this dimensional existence. So I would like to say that India has a lot to teach as much as a lot to learn, like everyone does. And the idea is being in conversation with all these realities in a humble way, as many as mentioned, but also is in a dignified way. India does have a lot to offer, and also, of course, a lot to learn from everyone, like everyone is. So I learned a lot from this conference. It's been an amazing joy. My short sharing with 1 minute of silence, in which I'm going to ask you to just see what comes to you. And I would like to ask you an act of generosity, in which at the end of this minute, and I'm going to keep track of time for you because I don't want you to look at the clock, I'm going to do it. At the end of this, if you don't mind, if you feel like sharing in our chat, the term that comes to you to summarize this experience of these 4 days together in these 2 weeks together in this global local paradigm of posthumanism, and of course located in India with all that is happening also at the moment. So whatever comes to you, don't judge yourself in non-judgmental ways, just share with us, because we do want to keep track of all the insights and maybe share it, if you don't mind, in a small document in our website. I'm going to ask you to only share one word. One word can be a lot. One word. Anything that comes to your mind. So I'm going to keep track of time. It's 12:53 in Est time. I'm based in New York. Now 12:54. You can get rid of your camera or not, whatever you want. I'm going to personally close my eyes, see what comes to my mind. 1 minute. In 1 minute, I'm going to come back and just ask everyone who feels through YouTube and also here to share one word, just anything that comes to you. And we're going to collect these and share it on our website later on. So everyone, 1 minute of silence and just no judgmental moment and see what comes to your mind. Keep it open. And I'm going to do the same. So everyone, if you feel like sharing one or maximum 2 words in the chat, we're going to be very, very grateful, and thank you so much, everyone.
While people are writing their words, we continue. Thank you, Dr. Ferrando. At this point, we'd like to share a few of our future plans. Firstly, as I already said, we encourage you to view and for members to share short papers in our website journal section. All our symposium papers are archived here. This is not only a place for written papers, but it may include multimedia materials. We will soon release a call for papers and responses from scholars to put in this section. This may include short articles, response pieces, including responses to this symposium, talks, interviews, commentaries, book and film reviews, and/or reviews of conferences related to posthumanism. And again, these we are hoping will become nodes of conversation for the network. Secondly, we intend to organize short events in the form of lectures, roundtables, panel discussions, or discussions of work in progress. We would invite both established scholars and young graduate researchers for the same. Thirdly, as already mentioned by Dr. Das, we hope to include some workshops and pedagogical component so that there is an exploration together of the ideas related to posthumanism, broadening the scope, and also entering into an inner relation with it. Fourthly, we plan to continue organizing symposia, perhaps once a year or once in 2 years as time and occasion permit. Finally, we are also thinking of producing some publications in the future. I think with that, I'd like to call on Dr. Sengupta to bring our event to a close with a vote of thanks.
Abhishek, do you mind if I take 1 minute to just
Yes.
briefly read all the insight
Okay,
that we
excellent.
got?
Okay. Yes, Francesca, why don't you do that?
All right, so just going to read the word connected, transformative, possibility, future, inception, revitalizing, in solidarity with posthumans here, relationality, presence, hope, planetary, enriching, integral horizon, brilliant. And then we have also our YouTube tribe, enlightening, encouraging, empowering, wonderful, great session.
Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Excellent, we got very good responses. Of course, all comments could not be responded, and I think we can continue the conversation among ourselves and also in the posthumanism or our posthumanism.in website. Some very important things, just a couple of things which I would like to mention. One is people in the YouTube chat box have wanted two very important suggestions. One we have already addressed, that is the need for a workshop to build up resources. The other is to give more emphasis on Indian thinkers and Indian traditions like Sufi saints or Bhagavad Gita, or as it has been proposed on J.C. Bose. These figures should be discussed in more details, and I personally feel some of the Indian traditions, they need more attention and time. And with this, I will come to the Thanksgiving session. This is the concluding session, but I am sure that this is not the conclusion of this dialogue which we have started. I'd like to thank Honorable Vice Chancellor of West Bengal State University, WBSU administration, the colleagues, all the colleagues of WBSU, that is West Bengal State University, and all the members of the Center for Comparative Social Theory. I would like to thank Professor Ritu Chaudhuri, who is the director of CCST, the center, and the professor of sociology, who has been all through with us, and she took the initiative of collaborating, and of course Dr. Anirban Das, who has been a major impetus and who connected us with CCST, he being the directorial advisor of CCST. He connected with us. We cannot thank him enough. Then we come to Aditya Banerjee, who is a visiting lecturer of English at Dirozio Memorial College, Rajarhat, and also a technical coordinator of CCST. He is the man in backstage who have been fighting to resolve all the technical glitches we have been having all through this long week. Then I would like to definitely thank Keka Chakraborty for her constant work in uploading the papers in the website. She is our webmaster of IPN, Indian Posthumanism Network, and she has done a great job indeed. Then I'd like to thank Professor Parthopratim Roy Chaudhuri, who teaches in the same institution where I am from. He is my colleague of English Department, Shammilani Mahavidyalaya. He has designed the poster. You have all seen the wonderful poster. He has designed the poster as he has been doing for our college for long. Then I would like to thank especially all the keynote speakers. Of course, Ritu Chaudhuri and Anirban once again, but especially I'd like to also thank Professor Anindo Sinha, Professor Pankaj Seksaria, Professor Christopher Chappell, and Professor Orko Chattopadhyay for their wonderful, brilliant lecture, their constant presence and support in the question-answer session, in chairing the sessions, and of course, Sucharita Sarkar for chairing the session and her constant presence, her commentary. I would also especially like to thank all the paper presenters, definitely, and definitely also the registered participants. They have helped so much in building up this dialogue, and of course I'd like to thank Devashish Da and Monirul for being, and Francesca definitely for being such nice colleagues and support in this entire journey. It was difficult because some of us were suffering from COVID. Our families also suffered, but we have been able to make it a success. Thank you.
And not to forget you, Shamrat.
Thank you, Shamrat.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Shamrat.
Thank you.
Shamrat did a lot of things because, I have been very busy because of the classes and the exam schedule in this, conference week. So most of the work, was done by Shamrat. So I would like to especially thank Shamrat for all the, work that he has done in the last 10-15 days. Excellent. To have you as your
It's
partner.
all about friendship. We are friends. When one person is busy, other will support. That is the spirit of posthuman.
Yes.
Posthuman network. Thank you.
Yes.
So I think we can.
I think that's a very profound point, Shamrat, because that is, when Simon Don is talking about individuation, he's saying the elements overcompensate for each other. That's what makes it an individual. It's not an individual until the elements begin overcompensating for each other. It just recognizes the fact that it needs to come in. So thank you. I think with that we can close today's symposium, and we look forward to...
Thank you all.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
It was really wonderful.
Anindra,
Thank you.
have a nice day. Good night.
Good.
We'll see you again.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Maybe in a physical conference. Maybe. Yeah.
We'll meet very soon.
Forward
Maybe.
to a physical conference, yes.
Yes.
We look forward to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Ritudi. Bye.
Bye.
Anirbandha.
Bye.
Yeah. Thank you. And the music, definitely. The musical interlude by Jonathan K. Jonathan, thank you for that.
Yes, anytime. Bye-bye.
Really
Bye.
great.
Yeah.
Bye.